His hands were still trembling when he set the phone down, not from fear, but from the weight of what he had just sacrificed. Callum Whitmore had 15 minutes to make the interview that could change everything. 15 minutes to save his son's future. But the woman trapped beneath concrete, her eyes finding his through the dust and chaos, she had maybe 5. Fate had always forced this man to choose between a dozen impossible things. Yet somehow, kneeling there in a stranger's blood, ruining the only suit he owned, he had never felt more certain about anything in his life. He and his son might have to leave that apartment, leave the city, but that was better than turning away from the woman for whom right now he was her entire world. And he had no idea that this woman, this stranger, gasping for breath beneath the rubble, held the key to everything he had lost 4 years ago. The morning had started at 5 a.m. in the cramped Mission District apartment. Callum moved through the darkness with practiced silence, starting coffee before waking his 7-year-old son Theo. The kitchen was small enough that only one person could stand at the counter, but Callum had learned to make it work over the years. He had no other choice. On the counter sat a small robot Theo had built from cardboard and spare parts, one leg dangling by a thread of tape. Callum picked it up with the careful attention of someone who understood how broken things fit together. The robot's right arm had come loose too, and the painted smile looked more like a grimace now. Theo had named it Rover 7, insisting the 7 was critical because it was his lucky number. Callum turned the small creation in his hands, feeling the weight of his son's imagination. He would fix it before Theo woke up. He retrieved his small toolkit from beneath the sink and sat at their fold-out table. His fingers, calloused from years of mechanical work, moved with precision despite their size. He reinforced the leg joint with a dab of proper glue rather than tape, then secured the arm with a small brace he fashioned from a paperclip. Small fixes that would make a world of difference to Theo. The morning light had just begun filtering through the apartment's single window when Callum noticed the envelope he had been avoiding. It sat on the counter where he had left it last night, the hospital logo in the corner, like an accusation. He set down the repaired robot and picked up the bill. 4 years since Margot's accident, and they were still paying. The medical debt had nearly drowned them at first. Now it was more like a constant weight on his chest, not quite suffocating, but never allowing a full breath either. Callum opened the envelope. His eyes scanned past the sympathetic language to the number at the bottom, and his stomach tightened. Behind that bill was another notice. This one from the bank. 60 days until they would initiate foreclosure proceedings if he could not catch up on the mortgage. 2 months to find a way to keep the only home Theo had known since he was 3 years old. But today could change everything. Today was the final interview at Kensington Industries, one of the biggest engineering firms on the West Coast. He had already passed 2 grueling rounds competing against 200 other applicants. Now he was one of 5 finalists. The position would triple his current salary. It would mean Theo could have the life he deserved, not just the life they could afford. Callum slipped the notices back into the envelope and pushed it under a cookbook. Today was about possibilities, not problems. The gray suit hanging on the bathroom door was slightly worn at the cuffs, but pressed and ready. It was the only suit he owned, and today it had to make him look like someone worth promoting to the big leagues. The coffee maker finished its cycle with a final sputter and hiss. Callum poured himself a cup and drank it black, leaning against the counter. Through the thin walls, he could hear Mrs. Holloway next door, already up and moving around. The elderly widow had been their neighbor since they moved in, often watching Theo when Callum had to work late. She had been Margot's closest friend too, one of the few connections to his wife that remained vibrant rather than painful. Sometimes Callum caught Mrs. Holloway looking at Theo with that particular sadness of someone who remembered what had been lost. She never spoke of it directly, but Callum knew she kept pieces of Margot alive in her memory stories. Moments, secrets perhaps, that she guarded carefully. Theo shuffled into the kitchen at 6:30, hair sticking up, eyes puffy with sleep. Callum had scrambled eggs and toast waiting orange juice in the only uncracked cup they owned. Theo spotted the robot immediately rushing to examine the repairs. You fixed Rover 7. The tape kept falling off no matter how much I used. Callum smiled at his son's delight. Rover 7 needed some professional engineering assistance. Just a little reinforcement at the joint points. The paperclip acts as a structural brace for the arm. Theo turned the robot carefully in his small hands, examining the fixes with serious concentration. That's what I'm going to do too. Fix things and make them better just like you. The simple declaration lodged something sharp in Callum's chest. His son's admiration was both gift and burden. Every day he fought to be worthy of it. Big day, Daddy. Theo's voice was small and hopeful as he turned to his breakfast. Callum smoothed his son's wild hair. Yeah, buddy, big day. If you get the new job, can we get pizza every Friday? The question struck him deeply. Such a modest dream for a 7-year-old to have. Callum forced a smile past the tightness in his throat. When I get the job, we'll get pizza every Friday. Promise? Theo nodded solemnly as though they had made a sacred pact. Then his expression shifted, a small furrow appearing between his eyebrows. Do you think Mom would be proud of the job? The question came from nowhere, as they often did with Theo. Margot had been gone 4 years, but she remained a presence in their daily lives. Not a ghost, but a foundation, someone they both measured themselves against in quiet moments. Callum sat down beside his son. She'd be proud of both of us, but especially you with your robots and your straight A's in math. Do you miss her? Theo asked, stirring his eggs without looking up. Every day, but it's okay to miss people and still be happy, buddy. Mom would want that most of all. Theo nodded, seemingly satisfied. She told me that once when Grandpa died, that it was okay to be sad and happy at the same time. Callum felt that familiar ache the moments Theo remembered that he could not possibly remember too young when Margot died to have stored such specific memories. Yet they surfaced occasionally, these fragments that Theo held on to with fierce determination. Whether actual memories or stories he had converted into memories through sheer will, Callum never questioned them. They were Theo's way of keeping his mother close. At the school gate, Theo wrapped his arms around Callum's waist. Good luck, Daddy. You're the best engineer in the whole world. Callum crouched to eye level with his son. And you're the best kid in the whole world. I'll pick you up at 3, okay? He watched Theo disappear through the school doors, then checked his watch. 7:45. The interview was at 9:30 downtown. He had spent 6 months preparing for this opportunity, working late nights after Theo went to bed studying Kensington Industries projects, researching their sustainability initiatives, rehearsing answers to every possible question. 2 rounds of interviews already passed. This was the final hurdle. Montgomery Station appeared at 9:15. Through the window, Callum could see the Kensington Industries building rising above the street, all glass and steel and promise. 15 minutes to walk 2 blocks and climb to the 14th floor. 15 minutes until his life could finally shift towards something better. The doors opened. Callum stepped onto the platform, portfolio clutched under his arm, mentally rehearsing his opening statement one more time. And then the world started shaking. At first it felt like the train was still moving, some trick of momentum. But then the shaking intensified and the platform buckled beneath his feet. People screamed. Overhead lights swayed violently. Glass shattered somewhere in the distance, with a sound like 1,000 wind chimes breaking at once. Callum grabbed a support column as his portfolio felt papers, scattering across the trembling concrete. Earthquake. 5.8 magnitude, they would say later. The strongest San Francisco had felt in a decade. The shaking stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving behind an eerie quiet broken only by distant sirens and people calling out to each other. Callum's hands were shaking from adrenaline, from the primal response of a body reminded how fragile everything was. He looked at his watch. 9:20. 10 minutes to get to the interview. The building was still standing, just 100 yards away. He could still make it if he ran. Callum bent to gather his scattered papers, shoving them back into the folder, with trembling fingers. And that was when he heard it, a sound that cut through all the other noise, quiet and desperate. Help! Someone please help! The voice came from an alley between two buildings, barely more than a whisper. Callum froze, his hand still on his portfolio. He should keep walking, should get to that interview. 6 months of preparation, 2 rounds already passed. This was everything he had worked for. But his feet carried him toward the alley before his brain could talk him out of it. There, half hidden behind a dumpster, pinned beneath a concrete slab that had broken away from the building's facade, was a woman. She was maybe 33, wearing a black blazer now covered in dust and debris. Blood seeped from a gash on her forehead, and her left leg was trapped beneath concrete at an angle that made Callum's stomach turn. Her eyes found his through the settling dust, wide and terrified. Please, I can't feel my leg. Callum dropped his portfolio. He was moving before he could think, before he could calculate the cost. He knelt beside her, assessing the situation with the same methodical attention he brought to engineering problems. The concrete slab was maybe 200 pounds resting on her shin. The blood flow suggested a bad break, possibly arterial. She needed help now, or she would go into shock. Okay, he said, keeping his voice steady even though his heart was hammering. I've got you. You're going to be fine. Her eyes locked onto his face, holding onto it like a lifeline. You should go. There's somewhere you need to be. I can see it in your face. Nowhere important. Callum lied, pulling out his phone to call 911. The operator's voice was harried, overwhelmed. Multiple emergencies across the city. Ambulance dispatched, but delayed. Could he stay with the victim? Could he provide first aid? Callum looked at his watch. 9:25. 5 minutes until the interview started. He thought about Theo's face at breakfast, asking about pizza on Fridays. He thought about the apartment they could barely afford, the bills stacking up, the chance he had worked so hard for, slipping away with every passing second. And then he looked at the woman trapped beneath the concrete at her eyes that held his like he was the only solid thing in a world that had just tried to shake itself apart. I'm staying, Callum told the operator. Tell me what to do. He used his tie, that navy blue tie, the only one he owned, as a tourniquet, wrapping it tight above the wound. The woman cried out, and Callum murmured apologies, anything to keep her conscious. He found pieces of wood in the alley and used them as levers, gradually lifting the concrete enough to pull her leg free. His suit jacket became a pillow. His dress shirt, torn into strips, became bandages. The woman drifted in and out of awareness. During a lucid moment, she tried to focus on his face. What's your name? Callum Whitmore. I'm Sloan, she whispered. Then her eyes rolled back. Callum held her hand, checking her pulse every 30 seconds, watching for the ambulance he could hear but could not see. He thought about the interview panel waiting 14 floors above them. He thought about the preparation, the rounds he had fought, through the opportunity that was evaporating with every minute that passed. But he did not let go of Sloan's hand. The ambulance arrived at 9:55. By then, Callum's shirt was soaked with blood that was not his, and his hands were covered in grime and concrete dust. The paramedics moved with efficient speed, loading Sloan onto a stretcher, praising Callum's quick thinking as they lifted her into the ambulance. Her eyes fluttered open one more time. She looked at him, really looked at him, as if committing every detail of his face to memory. Her lips moved, forming words he could not hear. Thank you, maybe, or something else. Then the doors closed and she was gone. Callum stood in the alley for a long moment, looking down at himself. His suit was ruined. His tie was somewhere in the ambulance. His shirt was destroyed. Blood on his cuffs, dust in his hair. He looked like a man who had been through a war. He walked to the Kensington Industries building anyway. The lobby was chaos, people evacuating, security guards directing traffic. Callum approached the reception desk where a harried woman was fielding phone calls. I had an interview, 14th floor, engineering position. I'm late. She barely looked at him. All interviews are canceled after the earthquake. You'll receive an email about rescheduling. When? I don't know, sir. We have to assess building safety first. Please evacuate with everyone else." Callum nodded numbly and turned away. Outside, he found a bench 2 blocks away and sat down, still processing what had just happened. 6 months of work, 2 rounds of competition, and he had missed the final interview for a stranger, for someone whose name he barely remembered. Sloan. His phone buzzed. An email from Kensington Industries. "Dear Mr. Whitmore, due to today's earthquake, your scheduled interview has been canceled. We will not be rescheduling at this time. Thank you for your interest in Kensington Industries. Not rescheduling, not postponed. Canceled." They had already filled the position or decided on another candidate. He was out. Callum sat on that bench until his hands stopped shaking, until the numbness gave way to something heavier. He thought about Theo waiting at school expecting good news. He thought about their apartment, about staying in a job that barely paid enough, about never quite getting ahead, no matter how hard he tried. But mostly he thought about Sloane's eyes, the way they had held on to his like he was saving the world instead of just one person. And he realized he had made the only choice he could live with. The only choice that let him look his son in the face and teach him what it meant to be a good man. Even if being a good man meant losing everything else. When you have the choice between being right and being kind, choose kind. It was something Margot used to say. Today he had chosen kindness over opportunity. Margot would have understood. He hoped Theo would too someday. 3 weeks passed. Callum returned to his regular job at Precision Engineering, the same mid-sized firm with the same limiting salary. He did not tell Theo about the canceled interview, the email that closed that door. Instead, he kept going, kept working, kept pushing forward. Because that was what you did when giving up was not an option. The additional medical bill he had been avoiding turned out to be the final notice before collection. Callum spent his lunch breaks on the phone with the hospital billing department, negotiating a payment plan that would stretch their budget even thinner, but might keep them afloat. The mortgage notice loomed larger as days passed. 60 days now shortened to 47. He started looking into cheaper apartments across town, wondering how Theo would handle changing schools mid-year. At night after Theo was asleep, Callum would sit at the kitchen table with spreadsheets and calculators trying to find numbers that added up to something other than loss. Sometimes in these quiet moments, he thought of Sloane, wondered if she was okay, if her leg had healed, if she remembered the man who had missed his future to hold her hand in an alley. Callum was at the Mill, a coffee shop on Divisadero Street, working on a project during his lunch break. He came here sometimes when he needed to think to escape the noise of the office. The place had good Wi-Fi and strong coffee, and the barista knew him well enough to start his order when she saw him walk in. He was focused on his laptop, troubleshooting a design flaw in a production line component when someone sat down at the table next to his. He glanced up out of habit and felt his heart stop. It was her, Sloane, the woman from the earthquake. She looked different now. Professional and polished her hair, styled the gash on her forehead, healed to a faint scar. She was walking with a slight limp, leaning on a cane, but she was alive and whole, and sitting 5 feet away from him. Callum stared, unable to look away. He had thought about her often in the past 3 weeks, wondered if she was okay, if she had recovered, but he had never expected to see her again, never expected this strange twist of fate. Sloane was focused on her phone, did not notice him watching. The barista called out a name for a drink order, and Sloane stood moving carefully on her injured leg. She reached for the cup at the same moment Callum stood to stretch his legs, and they nearly collided. "Oh, I'm so sorry." Sloane stepped back. Then she looked up at his face, and Callum watched recognition dawn in her eyes. Her expression shifted from polite apology to shock to something that looked almost like wonder. "It's you." "Hi," Callum managed. "How's your leg?" "You?" Sloane seemed to struggle for words. "I've been looking for you for 3 weeks. The police couldn't find you. The security footage was too blurry. I didn't know your name." couldn't remember. She stopped pressing a hand to her chest. You saved my life. I just helped until the ambulance came. No. Sloane's voice was firm. You saved my life, and then you disappeared. She gestured to an empty table. Can we talk, please? They sat, and Sloane told him what the doctors had said. How if Callum had not stopped, the bleeding had not kept her conscious, she likely would not have made it. How she had spent 3 weeks asking everyone, paramedics, police, hospital staff, trying to find the man in the gray suit who had pulled her from the rubble. I wanted to thank you, Sloane said, her voice thick with feeling. But more than that, I wanted to understand. You were dressed for something important. I remember that even through the pain. You had somewhere to be. An interview, Callum admitted. Final round at Kensington Industries. I'd passed 2 rounds, worked for months to get there. It was a big opportunity. Sloane's expression changed, something shifting behind her eyes. Kensington Industries. Yeah, they canceled it after the earthquake. Didn't reschedule. Callum tried to keep his voice neutral, but some of the disappointment must have leaked through. What's your full name? Sloane asked quietly. Callum Whitmore. She closed her eyes for a long moment, and when she opened them, tears were gathering at the corners. Callum, I'm Sloane Kensington. I'm the HR director at Kensington Industries. My father is Edmund Kensington, the CEO. I was on my way to work when the earthquake hit. I was taking a shortcut through that alley. She paused, her voice breaking slightly. You were coming to interview with me. The words hung in the air between them. Callum felt like the ground was shifting again, like the earthquake had never really stopped. The woman he had saved, the interview he had missed, the same person. I didn't know, he said. When I saw you in the alley, I didn't recognize you from the company photos or anything. I just saw someone who needed help. I know. Sloane reached across the table, her hand hovering near his, but not quite touching. That's what makes this so... She broke off, shaking her head. Callum, you gave up everything to save me. And I didn't even know who you were until I got back to the office and saw your name on the canceled interview list. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of coincidence and consequence settling between them. I want to make this right, Sloane finally said. I want to give you another chance at that interview. No. The word came out sharper than Callum intended. He softened his voice. Thank you, but no. I appreciate it, but I can't accept that. Why not you earned that interview? You competed through 2 rounds. The earthquake cost you an opportunity you deserved. Maybe, but if I interview now, I'll never know if I got the job because I was qualified or because I saved your life. And I need to know that when I succeed, it's because I earned it, not because someone felt obligated to help me. Sloane was quiet, studying his face with an intensity that made him self-conscious. Finally, she spoke. What if it's not about the job? What if it's just about getting to know each other? What do you mean? Sloane hesitated, choosing her words carefully. You saved my life, Callum. That's not a small thing. And I'd like to know who you are. Not as a candidate, not as someone I owe a debt to, but just as a person. Could we do that? Have coffee sometimes, talk, be friends. Callum considered this. There was something appealing about the idea, something that felt right, not transactional, not obligated, just 2 people who had been thrown together by circumstance, trying to understand what that meant. Okay, he said, I'd like that. Their coffee meetings became a weekly ritual. Sloane told him about her work at Kensington, about the pressure of being the CEO's daughter, about always wondering if people respected her for her skills or just her last name. Callum told her about Theo, about Margot's death 4 years ago, about the constant balancing act of being a single father while trying to build a career. They never talked about the interview again, never discussed job opportunities or professional advancement. They were just 2 people learning each other's stories, finding comfort in honesty and connection. One evening after weeks of coffee conversations, Sloan brought up something that had clearly been on her mind. Callum, I've been looking at some of your work. The designs you showed me last week, the efficiency improvements you developed at Precision, they're remarkable. Thanks, but I'm not sure how that helps with the mortgage. Sloan leaned forward, her expression serious. Have you ever considered consulting independent work rather than being employed by someone else? With your expertise in mechanical engineering and process improvement, you could offer specialized services to multiple companies. The idea was not entirely new. Callum had daydreamed about starting his own firm someday, being his own boss, choosing projects that excited him. But it had always seemed like a distant possibility, something for someday when they were more financially stable. I've thought about it, but starting a business takes capital connections time to build a client base. I can't risk Theo's stability on something that might take years to become profitable. What if you already had connections? Sloane's eyes were bright with intensity. What if I could introduce you to companies that need exactly your expertise? Not a job opportunities, not charity recognition of talent. Callum felt a flicker of wariness. This felt too close to charity to being given opportunities out of obligation rather than merit. Sloan, I can't accept special treatment because of our friendship. I meant what I said that first day at the coffee shop. Sloan shook her head, frustration evident. This isn't charity, Callum. This is recognizing talent and connecting it to opportunity. My job is literally identifying the right people for the right roles. I'm good at it. Your skills are being wasted at Precision. You know it. I know it. Why not let me make some introductions? Because Callum paused, trying to articulate the complex tangle of pride, fear, and principle that made him hesitate. Because I need to know that whatever success I have, I earned it myself. For Theo. For me. What if it's not about owing? What if it's about seeing potential and wanting to help it flourish? Isn't that what you do for Theo? Every day create opportunities for his talents to grow? The comparison struck Callum silent. He had never thought of it that way. Just think about it, Sloan said, gathering her purse. No pressure, no obligation. But don't dismiss possibilities because of pride, Callum. Theo deserves to see his father's talents recognized just as much as you want to see his flourish. The words echoed in his mind long after she left. The next morning he texted Sloan, I'd like to hear more about those connections. Not for charity, for Theo, for myself, because maybe you're right about potential. Her response came quickly, for potential. Lunch today, I know some people you should meet. And so Whitmore Engineering Solutions was born quietly, carefully, one client at a time. 4 weeks after their reunion at the mill, Sloan asked about Theo. You talk about him all the time, but I feel like I know this little person I've never met. Would it be okay if I met him sometime? They arranged to meet at Dolores Park that weekend. Theo was uncharacteristically quiet on the walk over, clutching Rover 7 in one hand and Callum's fingers in the other. What if she doesn't like robots? Theo finally asked as they approached the park. Everyone likes robots, buddy. Besides, Sloan is smart. She'll recognize how advanced Rover 7 is. But what if she doesn't like me? The real question emerged, small and vulnerable. Callum stopped walking, crouching down to Theo's level. That's impossible. You're the most likable person I know. But even if that somehow happened, which it won't, it wouldn't change anything between you and me. Okay. Theo nodded, but his grip on both the robot and Callum's hand tightened. Sloan was already at the park, sitting on a bench near the playground. She waved when she spotted them, her smile wide and genuine. Sloan stood as they approached, leaning slightly on her cane. She wore jeans and a casual sweater instead of her usual business attire, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. You must be Theo. Your dad has told me so much about you. Is that Rover 7? I've heard he's quite the advanced model. Theo's eyes widened. You know about Rover 7? Sloan nodded seriously. Your dad mentioned he helps with structural braces and joint reinforcement. Very impressive engineering. Theo's entire demeanor changed. He held up the robot proudly. I designed him myself. Dad helps with the hard parts. That's exactly how the best engineering teams work. The afternoon unfolded with unexpected ease. Theo showed Sloan every feature of the playground, offering running commentary on the engineering flaws and potential improvements. Sloan listened with genuine interest, asking questions that delighted Theo with their seriousness. Later, as Theo raced to the swings, Sloan turned to Callum. He's incredible. Smart, thoughtful, creative. You've done an amazing job with him. Thanks. I can't take all the credit. Margot laid the foundation. I'm just trying to build on it. And then Theo noticed Sloan's scar. What happened to your forehead? His eyes were fixed on the faint mark at her hairline. Sloan touched the scar self-consciously. I was hurt during the earthquake a few weeks ago. A piece of building fell. Theo's swing slowed as he considered this. Were you scared? Very scared, Sloan admitted. Until your dad found me. He helped me until the ambulance came. Theo's eyes widened, shifting from Sloan to Callum and back again. You're the lady from the earthquake, the one Dad helped instead of going to his interview. Callum felt a jolt of surprise. He had never told Theo those details. Sloan looked equally startled. You know about the interview? Theo nodded solemnly. I heard Dad talking to Mrs. Holloway next door. He missed a really important meeting to help someone hurt in the alley. That was you. That was me? Sloan confirmed, her voice soft. Your dad saved my life. Theo's face transformed with understanding and something like pride. That's why we still have pizza Fridays even though Dad didn't get the new job. Because helping people is more important than money. Callum felt something release in his chest at his son's simple wisdom. Sloan smiled at Theo, then at Callum. Some things are worth more than any job. Sloan had never liked Preston Calloway. As COO of Kensington Industries, he had been with the company for 15 years longer than Sloan had been part of the family. He smiled too much, agreed too easily, and there was something behind his eyes that made her uncomfortable, though she could never quite name it. Her father trusted him. Everyone trusted him, but Sloan had learned to trust her instincts. When Preston called her into his office one afternoon, those instincts screamed. I hear you've been socializing with someone, Preston said, his smile not reaching his eyes. A man from a small firm. Not good for the HR director's image, Sloan. My personal life doesn't concern you, Preston. Preston laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Everything about you concerns me. What do you think Edmund will say when he finds out his daughter is lowering herself? Sloane's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. And him, Callum Whitmore. Preston's voice dropped, taking on a different quality. His wife used to work here, didn't she, Margot Whitmore? Tragic accident, 4 years ago. Sloan stood frozen. You knew Margot. I know many things, Sloan. Margot Whitmore was a good engineer. She was also very curious, asked a lot of questions about budgets, about projects, about expenses that didn't quite add up. Preston's eyes glittered with something dangerous. Such a shame that accident happened right when she was about to talk to the board. The implication hung in the air like poison. That night, Sloan called Mrs. Holloway, Callum's neighbor, Margot's old friend. Mrs. Holloway, I need to ask you about Margot. About the weeks before she died. Did she say anything unusual? A long silence. Who are you? Why are you asking about Margot now after 4 years? I'm a friend of Callum's, and I think Margot's death might not have been an accident. The silence stretched even longer. Come to my house. There's something I've kept for 4 years. Something Margot sent me before she... I didn't know what to do with it. Mrs. Holloway, 68 years old, a widow who had lived next to Callum and Margot since before Theo was born, opened an old wooden box and removed a USB drive. Margot sent me this a week before she died. She said, if anything happens to me, keep this safe. Don't give it to anyone unless I say. But she never came back. Why didn't you give it to the police? Because Margot said, even the police might not be trustworthy. She was afraid of someone very powerful. And I'm just an old woman living alone. I was scared. Sloan took the USB drive, feeling its weight in her palm. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. This might be exactly what we need. That night, Callum received an anonymous text message. Stop what you're doing, or little Theo will have an accident just like his mother. His blood ran cold. He called Sloan, his voice shaking. They're threatening my son. Sloan, this isn't about justice anymore. This is about survival. In the weeks since starting Whitmore Engineering Solutions, Callum had landed 2 small contracts, enough to see possibility, not enough to solve everything. But he was building something real, something that was his. The mortgage deadline had been pushed back after he made a partial payment. Not solved, but survivable. And now with the USB drive in their possession, they had a chance at something more than survival. They had a chance at justice. They gathered at Callum's apartment late one evening. Callum, Sloan, and Mrs. Holloway. The USB drive sat on the table between them. It's encrypted, Sloan said after trying to open it. We need a password. Callum tried everything he could think of. Their anniversary, Theo's birthday, the street where they first lived, Margot's maiden name, her favorite song. Nothing worked. And then Theo walked in. He had woken up, wandered out to the living room in his pajamas. Daddy, what's going on? Why is everyone here so late? Go back to bed, buddy. Dad's just working on something. But Theo spotted the USB drive on the table. That looks like the one Mommy used to have. She called it her secret box. Callum's heart stopped. You remember that? Mommy said the password was the most important thing to her. Callum typed Theo incorrect. Mommy asked me once, what's the most important thing to Mommy? And I said, me. She laughed and said, yes, but the password has to be longer. It has to include everyone Mommy loves. Callum typed Theo and Callum. Incorrect. Theo thought for a moment, his small face scrunched in concentration. What did Mommy always say to us at night before bed? She said it every single night. Callum remembered. Every night without fail, Margot would tuck Theo in, then come to bed and whisper the same words. No matter what happens, we're a family. Forever. He typed family. Forever. The drive unlocked. Inside they found everything. Emails documenting embezzlement from research funds, millions of dollars siphoned over 5 years. Recordings of secret meetings between Preston and outside partners discussing how to hide the money. And the most damning evidence of all, a video. Margot had recorded it herself. In it, Preston stood in her office, his face contorted with rage. You think you can destroy my career? You're just a small engineer. Nobody will believe you. And if you try to talk to the board, he leaned closer. I'll make sure you never talk to anyone again. 1 week later, Margot was dead. A car accident on a rainy night. No witnesses. Case closed. Callum watched the video, his hands shaking, his eyes burning with 4 years of suppressed grief and rage. He killed her. Preston killed Margot. Sloan reached across the table and took his hand. We'll make him pay, Callum. I promise you. We'll make him pay. Theo had been watching silently from the doorway. Now he walked over to Sloan, who was trying to hold back tears. He took her hand in his small one. Miss Sloan, you know what Mommy told me once? Sloan looked at him, tears streaming down her face. Mommy said, good people sometimes have to hurt, but hurting doesn't mean losing. Hurting means you're fighting for what's right. And people who fight for what's right. He paused, his young voice steady and sure. They never really lose. Sloan pulled Theo into a hug, her tears falling freely. Your Mommy was the most wonderful woman, Theo, and you're so much like her. The next day, Sloan brought the evidence to her father. Edmund Kensington listened in silence as the video played. His face went pale, then red with anger. "I trusted him," Edmund said, his voice barely a whisper. "For 15 years, I trusted him." "We need to do this right," Sloan said. "Public, undeniable. He can't be allowed to escape." Edmund nodded slowly. "The board meeting? Tomorrow. Full attendance. He won't suspect a thing." The boardroom at Kensington Industries was full. 12 board members sat around the massive conference table. Preston Calloway stood at the head, confident as always, presenting plans for a new expansion into international markets. He was halfway through his presentation when Edmund Kensington rose to his feet. "Before we continue, there's a matter that needs to be addressed." Preston's smile flickered but held. "Of course, Edmund. What is it?" Edmund nodded to the IT technician by the door. The presentation screen went dark. Then a video began to play. Preston threatening Margot. Preston discussing how to handle the problem with his partners. Emails proving millions of dollars in embezzlement. The room fell absolutely silent. Preston's face went white. This is fabricated. Someone has..." The boardroom doors opened. FBI agents walked in their badges. Visible, their expressions grim. "Preston Calloway, you are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, witness intimidation, and suspicion of involvement in the death of Margot Whitmore. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the handcuffs clicked around Preston's wrists, he turned to Sloan with hatred burning in his eyes. "You think you've won? You're just an adopted child Edmund picked up off the street. You don't deserve any of this. You're nothing." Edmund Kensington stepped forward, placing himself between Preston and his daughter. His voice was cold as ice. "Sloan is my daughter, not by blood, but by choice. And that choice is worth more than anything you could ever understand, Preston. She has more integrity in her smallest finger than you have in your entire being." Preston was led away, still struggling, still protesting. The entire boardroom rose to its feet, applauding. Justice had finally been served. After the meeting, Callum and Sloan stood by the window, looking out over the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "You did it," Callum said quietly. "Margot, she can finally rest." "No." Sloan turned to face him. "We did it. Together. And that means..." "What does that mean to you, Callum?" He looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who had entered his life through tragedy and stayed through choice, who had seen him at his worst and believed in his best, who loved his son as if Theo were her own. "Sloan, I love you." The words came out before he could second guess them. "Not because you're the HR director. Not because you helped me find justice for Margot. I love you because you're the first person who made me believe I deserved to be loved again. You're the first person who saw me not a pitiful widower, not a struggling single father, but me, just me." Sloan smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "And you're the first person who ever refused my help. Do you know how rare that is? My whole life, everyone has wanted something from me. My connections, my father's money, my position. But you..." She reached up and touched his face. "You just wanted me." They kissed as the sun set over San Francisco, two broken people who had somehow made each other whole. 6 months later, a new house with a garden. Callum, Sloan, and Theo were planting flowers in the backyard on a warm Saturday afternoon. Whitmore Engineering Solutions had grown to 5 steady clients now. They had left the old apartment behind, moved into a small house with a garage that served as Callum's office, and a yard that Theo absolutely loved. The mortgage crisis was behind them. The medical bills were finally paid off. And for the first time in years, Callum could look at the future without fear. Theo was working on Rover 8, a significantly upgraded version with a dynamic balance system that Sloan had helped him design. The robot could now walk on uneven surfaces without falling over a major breakthrough in 7-year-old engineering. Daddy, can I ask Miss Sloan something? Of course, buddy. Theo ran to Sloan, his expression serious as a tiny adult conducting important business. Miss Sloan, can I call you Mom Sloan? Because I have Mommy Margot in heaven and Mom Sloan here. Is that okay? Sloan knelt down to his level, her eyes glistening with tears. I would be so honored, Theo. So incredibly honored. Theo hugged her tight, then pulled back with the mercurial energy of childhood. Okay, I'm going to test Rover 8's new balance system on the stepping stones. He ran off, robot in hand, leaving the two adults in the garden. Callum looked at the flowers they had planted together. Yellow roses, Margot's favorite. She had always said yellow roses represented friendship and joy, the things that mattered most in life. And sunflowers, because Theo remembered that Mommy had a sunflower dress. And sunflowers always face the sun, always looking for light, even on dark days. Sloan came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. She would be proud of you, Sloan said softly, of everything you've built, everything you've become. Callum nodded, feeling the familiar ache of loss mixed now with something new, something like peace. Can you see Margot? He whispered. We're okay. We found our way home. Sometimes the universe pushes you onto a path you didn't choose. An earthquake, a split-second decision, a stranger who becomes your whole world. Callum Whitmore had stood on that train platform with 15 minutes to change his life. He had 15 minutes to reach the interview that would save his family. But a woman trapped in an alley had only 5 minutes to live. He made his choice. And that choice, that single moment of choosing kindness over opportunity, choosing a stranger's life over his own dreams, led him here. To this garden, to this family, to justice for the woman he had loved and lost. Margot used to say, when you have the choice between being right and being kind, choose kind. He had chosen kind, and kindness had given him everything. Not the life he had planned, but the life he was meant to live. A life where broken things could be fixed, where lost things could be found, where families could be rebuilt from the rubble of tragedy. A life where love in the end always found a way home.